Hello, welcome to Revenant Reads. I'm Vin, and this is another edition of Fresh Red Kills. So Fresh Red Kills is where I talk about books that I have recently finished reading, and I have two books that sort of deal with religion in their own ways. Two books I read back in June. The first one that I guess I'll discuss is Asatru for Beginners, or Asatru, I'm never quite sure exactly how I should be pronouncing that. A Modern Heathen's Guide to the Ancient Northern Way by Mathias Nordvig, PhD. And then Carl Sagan's The Variety of Scientific Experience, A Personal View of the Search for God. Book that's been on my shelf for a long time, and I'm really glad I finally got to it. But first, I guess I'll talk about this one. Back in May, there is an annual booktube event called Maybe Midrash. Not as, I guess, widespread as it once was, but it's one that I still like to take part in. It's essentially a chance to read about religion, seriously. And I had read something about, Christian history, but I also read a book about modern practice of heathenism, also known as like Norse paganism or Asatru, which basically means like I think faith in the gods, or belief in the gods. And it's something that has definitely held a lot of attraction for me. Just to clarify, I am an atheist. I don't believe in the supernatural, but I have been very interested in paganism from a ritualistic point of view, and also just from a sort of perspective of attuning myself more to like seasonal changes and nature. And also one of the things I like about this as well, this sort of version of paganism, is an emphasis, excuse me, on thinking about ancestors in the past. I find myself as a naturally secular person, I don't pay attention to those things as much as I would like to. And I have been, sort of more and more convinced over time that ritual and myth and story are ways where I can kind of train my brain to do that. Now, the book that I had read in May for Maybe Midrash that dealt with heathenism was okay. It was a very, very polytheist view, which is not the only way that you can approach paganism. This one isn't necessarily like that, and I'll talk about some of the differences and why I kind of prefer this one overall. I will say, before I read this, though, I had been talking with some friends about my sort of, flirtation with paganism, or sort of atheo-paganism and atheist paganism, emphasizing things a little more like ritual and story rather than any kind of actual belief. And these are two friends who, a married couple, who a little while back they had mentioned how they had gone to church, but they had also expressed earlier than that they didn't really have much faith anymore. And when they talked about going to church recently, and I had asked, do you mind me asking this, but are you compelled to go to church, do you think, more by faith or more by ritual? And they, without pause, said ritual. It wasn't about faith, it was about ritual. They liked the community. However, they also said that they didn't find fulfillment in it anymore. It felt like a very empty thing that they were doing. So when I was, kind of expressing my own ideas about paganism, maybe incorporating pagan practice and atheist type of paganism, animism especially, into my life, into my calendar, they expressed a lot of interest in that. And they said, hey, if you want to do something, we'll go along with it. We'll give it a try. So I decided to do something for the summer solstice. And they came over, and we kind of had this pagan-esque, summer solstice celebration. It was an incredibly hot day, but it kind of forced us to be outside to just experience the day, experience nature. We did have a fire going outside. I did a simmer pot, which is something that I guess witches generally do, but I just liked it because it's a cool idea. Essentially, you have a pot of boiling water, and you put things in there that represent the season. And what I put in there was sliced lemons and oranges. I put some vanilla extract in there. Then I put some flowers from the garden and also some mugwort. And you let it boil, then you let it simmer. And the steam rises and it just fills your house up with this amazing smell that will remind you of the season. So I had that going. We made a bunch of foods that represented like summer and light and sun to us. And we also did a sort of heathen ritual that isn't actually talked about in here, but it was talked about in the other book. I think it's derived more from Anglo-Saxon paganism, but called a sumbel. It's a drinking ritual. And, when I told them about that whole thing, they said they want to try that. So we did do that. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail over these things, but they liked it. And, one of them, my friend, back in college, he used to fire dance. And he hadn't done it in years and years and years. And he said, you know what? I'm going to take out this old thing, and it's the summer solstice. And it allowed him, he had said, to kind of reconnect with something that he hadn't done in a long time. And his kids, for the first time, were able to see that he had this skill. So we kind of had this fun, summer solstice celebration that I'd never done before. And they had said in the end, they want to do this again for the autumn equinox. And so that's what made me go back and start reading more again. So I ended up reading this in June. They're at the end of June. So this is Asatru for beginners, right, as we could see. And once again, it's about Norse paganism or heathenism. And I don't know what to call myself, right? I am still an atheist, maybe atheo-pagan at this point. I don't have any belief, but I do like the ritual. I like the story. I've always felt a real affinity for Norse mythology and Norse stories. And the more I learn about Norse religion, I don't necessarily mean like all the blood sacrifice, but the different parts of the soul and different perspectives on life, the Disir, the land spirits. I just find that stuff really fascinating and a certain connection to it. So I decided to pick this up for a different perspective on modern practice of heathenism. And I did end up liking this one more than the one that I had read in May. It is not strictly polytheist. It is far more open to different realms or different people approaching things from different ways. It does not necessarily emphasize a belief in the gods. And especially there was a clarification here that I liked, where he talks about things like Odin. I'll just read what it says here. Maybe you'll see what I'm saying here. Odin was a very popular god to whom many Asatru relate. Many see him as the Allfather, although this is a misunderstanding of his original nature. Snorri is responsible for having portrayed Odin as the Allfather in Edda, essentially interpreting him as a heathen version of the Christian god in the Bible. Scholars of Norse literature are well aware of this, but the knowledge has not necessarily reached the broad public. In Scandinavia, few see Odin as an Allfather, but many American Asatru he is revered as just that. The reason is probably that many Americans have grown up with a somewhat authoritarian version of Christianity, and when they find Asatru, they seek familiarity in the heathen spirituality. However, this is markedly different in Scandinavia, where few have the same ideas of religious authorities as in North America. And he essentially is talking about how, the two continents, pagans tend to view somebody like Odin a lot more differently. The previous book that I had read, the gods were really seen as, it seemed like entirely benevolent and just waiting to, basically help out mankind and to be revered. And this is definitely much more cautious of things like that. He goes on to say that, the truth is that a follower of Asatru should be very careful with creating close bonds with Odin. He is not the caring, reliable god that many believe him to be. Everything he gives comes with a price. It was that kind of refreshing perspective that I appreciated in this. And it says that it's a modern heathen's guide to the ancient Northern way. I wouldn't call it a guide. It's definitely an introduction, but there's not a lot of how-to in here. He does talk about some things that the other book didn't talk about, such as, let's see in here. He does have a thing on Seether, which is like a witchcraft, I believe. I think he might even talk about Utaseta. Which is a meditation practice, and the other book didn't really talk about that stuff that much, but the other book talked about symbol. He doesn't really talk about that, but he does talk about bloats. It could be blood sacrifice, but it's more like a ritual. This was a nice introduction, I thought. Again, not necessarily a guide, but I thought it was a nice introduction to the Norse pagan practice. I am going to read some more things. I did pick up another book on paganism from the same publisher. This is Rocket Ridge Press that I'm going to maybe read this month or next month. So you're going to be seeing things like this popping up over, on my channel, excuse me, here and there as I just kind of indulge in this interest. And I will say also that on the 4th of July, we were sitting with some people, another couple, around a fire, and this topic of religion came up. And, we were talking about our own religious backgrounds and ideas, and I started talking about what we had done for the summer solstice. We talked about the symbol, and that couple said, hey, if you do that for the equinoctials, we'd love to come. They're also interested. So we're finding a lot of people who are expressing a deep interest in what we're doing when we start explaining it. There definitely seems to be a need for people to connect to nature and community. And these are all pretty secular-minded people. Two of the people that I was talking to between those two groups are trained and employed scientists. So we're all kind of looking for certain ways to connect, and they've all been interested. So I don't know what my autumn equinox at this place is going to look like, but it might be pretty busy. Might have a lot of people. And I'll talk about this kind of briefly. This is kind of also an extension of maybe Midrash, looking at Carl Sagan, who's kind of one of my personal heroes, I would say, and his views of religion and God. And this was also, I kind of counted this also as an away mission for Book Trek 2024. That's a yearly event where we read Star Trek fiction, but there are also two optional away missions, one of them being reading nonfiction science, which does have some of that in here. What these are actually, these are the published Gifford lectures that Carl Sagan gave back in 1985. And the Gifford lectures, I guess, are about, if I might be wrong about this, but what I got from the book, they're essentially, they ask people to come and speak about theology in ways that are grounded in like reason and logic and, scientific thinking. And Sagan seems pretty perfect for that. And he gave this series of lectures, but even though it was from 1985, it's mostly very timeless. It feels very, very of the now. There's only certain occasions where, like, he'll reference like the Soviet Union or African apartheid or, something like that. We're like, oh, that's right. This is the 80s, or Reagan's like Star Wars, his project. But otherwise, he goes through things like the arguments for God and kind of breaks those apart. He goes through the likelihood of intelligence in the universe and what that could mean. And he has such a clear way of writing that I've always been drawn to. He was, I think, just a clear thinker, and he knew how to kind of, extract the poetry and the romance from science and from existence in really remarkable ways. And I just kind of adored this. I loved it. This edition, this is the hardcover edition, the original one, it was filled with all kinds of images as well. A lot of them, full color. See if I can find. So yeah, I just really, really love this. Now, this, these do represent sort of two aspects of my personality or my journey at this point. I am still very much primarily this sort of thing. I am an agnostic atheist. Science for me is still the way to truly understand the universe. However, I think that science has the ability to inspire. And to also, to awe, right? To generate awe in the universe and to understand the universe. I don't think it often gives us the ability to motivate. And that's where I'm looking at things like ritual and story. Because our brains aren't often motivated by science, but they are motivated, I think, more by ritual and story. So I am consciously sort of training my brain to think in certain ways that I want it to think through this sort of thing. So you can kind of see, I don't consider this yin and yang. I consider these more complementary, because really the kind of thinking that Sagan, I think, represents, the most compatible, I think, religious system is more grounded in animism, for a respect for nature, respect for the universe, for respect of our, to have a more realistic understanding of our place in the universe. Animism, probably our most ancient religion, but maybe the one that is actually going to pave the way for the future, for us to actually live in some kind of harmony with nature and not keep destroying it the entire time. So anyhow, there's a lot more that I could say. I'm trying to keep this video fairly brief, and these are things, especially this thing I'm saying, is something that I'm still kind of working through and developing my thoughts on. So if you've read any of these, As always, love to hear your thoughts. Because these things deal with religion, please make sure we keep the comments respectful. And as always, thank you, BookTube.